Everyone's pretty peeved at the Acolyte. I don't care about Star Wars, but I always have my snoot to the ground in search of fresh cringe. Before it aired, this show generated a flood of outrage. All of this bad press made me expect this show would debut Leather Gear Yoda, and boy does this fall flat. The protagonist has a throwaway line about having two mommies, but there's not a Neo pronoun in sight. Now, a lot's been said about the series creator Leslye Headland's politics. Since it's already been dissected to death, I won't waste your time with my room temperature opinion, but I was curious if this chick is as much like Big Red as everyone says she is, so I headed to IMDb to check for clues. I was surprised. In her interviews with IMDb, the topic of fanfiction kept coming up, as in like, oh wow, she's such a big Star Wars fan, she even wrote fanfiction as a kid. But she kept getting very shy, and wouldn't share whatever cringe fanfic she wrote before going pro. And I gotta say, whatever cringe fanfic she wrote had to have been better than this. This entire plot can be summed up as a retired cop gets wrongly accused of murder, so now she's coming back to the force for one last time. Except this retired cop movie's in space. It was an aggressively by-the-numbers story, which is pretty surprising, especially since this is the creator of Russian Doll. Does she just respect Star Wars too much to experiment? Were the corporate suits at Disney breathing down her neck too hard to let her experiment? I know this isn't how it works, but I'm imagining Disney gave her something like a Dungeons & Dragons skill point sheet and told her to think very carefully about how she wanted to spend her points. And all the points were spent on diversity, so nothing could go towards a unique plot, and that's how we ended up with Cop Story in Space. Which sucks, because like I said, this isn't an over-the-top diversity cringe fest. If something's less tutti-frutti than Steven Universe, I can't process it as SJW media. So good job wasting your skill points, idiot. I'm having trouble imagining what I would change to make this a better show. It was all just sort of a white noise. Everything moves so slow. It's the kind of shitty cop movie your dad would fall asleep to. And he only threw that on because he's seen that NCIS rerun 3 times. So I want to bring it back to fanfiction. A lot of the fun of fanfiction and headcanons is bringing a slight twist to the story. Like, what if these two characters were in love? What if the protagonist was secretly a werewolf? How would these characters act if they had to run a coffee shop? So I look at the Acolyte and think, okay, what fanfic trope could we plug into this story to spice things up? And I'm sorry dude, but I'm totally drawing a blank here. I know with a lot of cop shows and mystery stories, it's less about the characters and more about thinking through the logic puzzle of whodunit. But this show is not giving me anything. I can't tell you anything about who these characters are or what they would do as soon as the camera stops rolling. What's more is this type of minimalist characterization can benefit the right story. That is, fan speculation for simpler character templates can be part of the fun and the charm of a series. For example, please see Death Note and its endless yaoi fanfiction, or for a surrealist mystery, I would use Amazing Digital Circus as my example. And I think it's more appropriate to compare Digital Circus to the Acolyte, since as of this writing, both only have 2 episodes. And although Digital Circus is more of a surrealist existential mystery rather than a murder mystery, right now its characters are fitting snugly in their basic TV tropes. But like, if you threw these characters into a coffee shop, I know exactly how they'd act. Jax has a secret schoolyard bully crush on Pomni, that story writes itself. Oh, you throw a werewolf into the ring, yeah, I know who's getting bit and who's fighting back. I can't even imagine how the characters in the Acolyte would act in these hypothetical fanfic scenarios, because their characterization really is that flimsy. I guess if I really think about it, I can draw a character relationship chart. So, okay, the protagonist is the former student of Asian Dumbledore, she has an evil twin, and this guy over here is suspicious of her. But those aren't character traits, that's just kind of how they're positioned in the story. Let me bring things back to Death Note, because a lot of that story is how the different pieces are arranged. But even there, you could still broadly describe the characters. I guess the one character in the Acolyte who has a personality is Dumbledore. He's able to predict that the protagonist is a good guy, and he's always a step ahead of everyone. And this character reminded me one-to-one of what Freddie deBoer wrote when he was summing up his experience watching Harry Potter. Here's what he said. My biggest beef with Harry Potter was that the stories just felt trite. Despite the endless, explicit threats, never really had stakes. And my brother nodded and said Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. As he laid out, and apparently fairly common, complaint with the series is that Dumbledore is such an all-knowing sage and is so consistently revealed in the end to have predicted everything and been on top of everything that any real sense of danger evaporates. Again and again and again. Dumbledore knew. Oh, you thought Harry Potter and his friends were in danger? Wrong! Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. You thought Dumbledore was losing? Haha, you fool! Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. The gang has gotten up to some wacky mischief, and they've been able to keep the truth of their adventures hidden from the adults at Hogwarts. They're sure they've gotten away with it, but whoops, here's an arch comment from Dumbledore, while he's in the process of giving them a completely inappropriate number of house points, that reveals that he knows all about it already. Because Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore is being cold and distant, and we think, could it be? Could Dumbledore have a flaw? Could he be wrong? Nope, Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. He always had some deeper purpose, silly, and shame on us for thinking otherwise. Snape kills Dumbledore? Looks like he wasn't able to wriggle his way out of that one. Hey, dumbass, Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all. He planned that all along. Like Jesus, his betrayal was preordained. Dumbledore is never wrong and explains it all from beyond the grave. All of which, A, makes me root against Dumbledore, that fucking smug prick, and B, just murders stakes and risk. When a saintly grandfather figure inevitably reveals that he knew everything that was going to happen, including in the afterlife, it just makes everything trite and boring. Okay, back to the Acolyte. So we've got a cast of idiots just sort of bumbling around and getting strung along by the plot, a single Dumbledore who's calling all the shots. I'll bring it back to fanfiction again, but how is this gay? How would anyone interested in gay shipping in the fanfic scene be on board with this show? There's only one chick at this clam bake, and no one to adequately ship her with. Is she going for the strong, independent woman trope? Or is the sus guy going to get any ship tease moments with her? He's not even enough of a bad boy to satiate the chicks who are into that. Somehow sus guy is even more than Edward Twilight. If anything, I feel bad. Leslye Headland set out to make a queer-friendly Star Wars, and nobody likes it. If you told me in 2019 that the Russian doll creator was cooking up a Star Wars series about secret twins, I'd be like, hell yeah, sign me up. I'll catch its premiere at the Galactic Star Cruiser. I just didn't expect it to be boring.